What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So over the weekend, I did put out a video updating the GameCube collection that I'm building here. So if you missed that, go check that one out if you want to take, I guess, a stroll down memory lane from the early 2000s with some of those games. And we also took apart the Ring Fit Adventure ring to see what was going on in there and had an interesting tie or callback to a very old accessory that was pretty neat to see. Today, though, we have some things to go over, which includes a franchise that could actually be coming back based on some reports that are starting to hit the internet. And it's from Konami, so that's going to be the most interesting part here. And it looks like Reggie had a bit of a hand in keeping that Nintendo logo exactly how it is now, because it seems like there was some doubt around how it currently is and if they should have changed it. And this is an odd story, but we'll go over that and more today, guys. As always, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. I do appreciate you guys hitting the like button quite a bit. Like I said, over the past month or so now, has helped out a lot. And if you're brand new here, make sure you subscribe down below with the bell notification on so you can stay up to date with all of the gaming news going on in the gaming world. We're actually going to start today with EB Games Canada. Over the weekend, we saw them tweet out that Street Fighter V Champion Edition would be heading to the Switch. It was strange because that was the first time we had heard about it. And normally we're used to, Walmart Canada telling us that. No, EB Games Canada decided to tweet that out, and now they have retracted it, and they've posted this tweet correcting it, saying, "We posted a tweet advertising Street Fighter V Champion Edition for the Nintendo Switch earlier this evening. Please note that the details in this tweet were inaccurate and were posted in error. The intention for the tweet was to highlight the PlayStation 4 version of the game," which is kind of what I was thinking when I first saw it. I was like, oh, whoever was running this social media account maybe messed up. Maybe they were typing something out for the PS4 and the Switch at the time and kind of getting tweets all, figured out and scheduled and all of that. And they just accidentally put the wrong system in there. It is something to consider, though, going forward. But the thing that threw me off is Street Fighter V was Sony's thing. They funded it alongside Capcom. So it would be weird that it would go to the Switch unless there was a contract that was just up and they were allowed to do it. And hey, Sony's been... we're hearing about Horizon Zero Dawn going to PC, so Sony's kind of easing up on the idea of full exclusivity. Oh, we'll see what happens when that gets announced anyway with Horizon Zero Dawn and apparently other PlayStation games. You never know, I guess, even when it comes to Street Fighter V, but we'll see. Also, we've been on Bluepoint Watch this whole time trying to figure out what they're making. A lot of us assume it's a remake of something like Demon's Souls, or I guess it could be like a brand new game, but they have continued to hire and they changed up their front page a bit, as you're seeing here. It actually says, established in 2006 with a team of now over 90 people, Bluepoint has developed a history of delivering the highest quality remasters and remakes in the industry, but that's not enough for us. Our latest project is the largest in our history and aims to define the visual benchmark for the next generation of gaming hardware. So yes, it sounds like they're going to be pushing pretty hard with this next project that, for the PS5, right? That's what we all assume. PS5, Bluepoint, something big. Demon's Souls or Metal Gear Solid seem to be like the front runners now. Would Konami, Sony, and Bluepoint all get together and do a Metal Gear Solid? And think about Metal Gear Solid from the PS1, then Twin Snakes, then making the jump all the way up to the PlayStation 5 with Bluepoint wanting to define next generation visuals. That would be something else. Demon's Souls would be cool as well, but I'm leaning towards I would like to see Metal Gear. However, at this point, it could also just be a brand new game, and we'll see. I'm hoping that whenever the PlayStation event where they show us the PS5 happens, we will see whatever Bluepoint's working on. Oh, and in some quick retro news, do you remember how before we had seen Arwings actually spawned into Zelda Ocarina of Time? They were used for the Z targeting system, and I believe the boss from the Fire Temple, just kind of get that set up. Yeah, they actually used like small Arwings that would fly around, but it was mostly just used for testing, not when you're actually playing the game. Like, there's no real way to really unlock the R-Wing unless you do things like Game Shark, or you just go in and you just edit the code and use it in an emulator, or you just have a ROM that's been hacked. However, it looks like using ACE, which is arbitrary code execution, we've now seen someone actually take the R-Wing and spawn it into Ocarina of Time, where you can see a clip that's been running here where you can see the R-Wings flying around. That was not not done with a Game Shark or a hacked ROM, and it is a lengthy process, it's a thorough process, but when it all happens, you don't need any kind of cheat device or any way to actually go in and edit manually the code. You basically make the game glitch and do it that way, which is really, really neat to see that. It's a method people who speedrun Ocarina of Time have been using, and now they've used it to spawn in Arwings. It's just neat to see. And guys, some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start with this franchise that is being reported to make a return with 2 different games, and it's under Konami, so that's why I am always skeptical about this stuff. However, it seems like more and more sources have come out to confirm that something is going on with Silent Hill, the franchise itself. Not necessarily just like a working title or anything for one game, but it does appear that there are 2 games currently in development that have been shopped around. Now, Eurogamer went ahead and reported on it after, I guess, checking around. Then we had other places, like I said, also kind of throw in some confirmations around this. Now, the quote you're seeing here is from Aesthetic Gamer from Twitter saying, "In other news, while I'm dropping this stuff, and I think I can talk about this, I'll mention there is a couple of new Silent Hill games in the works. Konami, about 2 years ago, reached out to various developers to pitch ideas for 2 Silent Hill games, one a soft reboot of the franchise, the other an episodic Telltale Until Dawn style game to go alongside the reboot. I don't know anything more than that, though, but I sure do hope Konami's given it the appropriate budget and found the right developer to make those games succeed." Now, other places like Rely on Horror have confirmed that they have also heard the same thing, and right now this is being thrown around as Konami possibly going back, getting the Silent Hill series and actually doing something with it that is not related to gambling, because remember the last time we saw Silent Hill, it's because they decided to introduce it as a new gambling machine for casinos. Yes, it was a sad, sad thing to see. So now to hear about the idea of them doing a soft reboot and an episodic game is exciting, but it's still Konami. They haven't exactly been on a roll recently with, Metal Gear Survive, and then we had that Contra game that was just, I don't know what that was about. It was just not good. So I am concerned that Konami would maybe cheap out on some things or not do it well. Because keep in mind, Silent Hill has, of course, that cult following, you could say, and if it comes back and it's not good, that's not going to be good. I would like to think that they understand that, and the reason it's been taking so long to get this done is, I mean, maybe they are just fascinated with the idea of slot machines and pachinko machines. And I mean, they even took Metal Gear Solid and rather than build a whole nother game, they put it into a pachinko machine. So yeah, maybe they really do just want to go in that direction. But let's say they see Silent Hill and they say, okay, we'll have a lower budget style game like this episodic one, but then we're going to have one that is at least funded well enough to actually make a run at it. My problem, like I said, is just I don't necessarily trust Konami when it comes to this, and Aesthetic Gamers also said, hey, there's a chance that it could even be revealed this year. That could be something that maybe they're working alongside of Sony or Microsoft. Maybe they've gone to one of them for funding. That would be, I think, the best bet, because then we know Konami wouldn't just be like, trying to cut down wherever they can. If Sony or Microsoft, or even, I guess even Nintendo technically, come in and work to fund it, then we know it would get done at least well, like in terms of funding. So that's always been something I've looked at with Konami is, despite them making a lot of money from their gambling stuff, if they don't see gaming as heavily profitable for them, they just won't give them enough of a budget to complete a game and make it work well, and you end up with something like Contra. But we'll see. I'm hoping we get a look at something Silent Hill this year. That'd be amazing. That'd be a really cool E3 reveal, I think. But for now, we'll just have to wait and see if anything else really comes of it. Maybe we start getting a tease from Konami or a Silent Hill Twitter account or something. That'd be pretty cool with a build up to June when I guess E3 takes place. Without Sony, technically, it would just, I guess Konami would just go to another stage, or maybe they would, I don't know, just put it out there. Also, I don't believe that Kojima would work with Konami again. It seemed like they were at odds quite a bit. So while Kojima has talked about doing a horror game, I doubt him and Konami are going to be syncing back up to make a Silent Hill game. Next up, let's talk about the Nintendo logo and Reggie Fils-Aimé. An interview recently, and he talked about when he first joined Nintendo, their thoughts around the logo. The Nintendo logo that we know now, that we see in every direct, right? In the beginning and then at the end, different trailers. Yeah, that logo. Well, this is what he actually had to say in the interview. During the Present Value podcast, he said, "When I joined Nintendo, there was a sense of almost shame that Nintendo appealed to young consumers, and the marketing team at Nintendo of America started doing things with the logo, that classic Nintendo logo in an oval. They would put it into graffiti style, or they do different things to try and age up the logo, and I put a stop to that because that is not our brand, and what we needed to do was, yes, appeal to a broad swatch of consumers, but we needed to do it based on what the brand stood for and not doing it in some false way. Systematically, we went through and cleaned up the presentation of the brand, but we also created messaging coupled with content that really broadened the reach, broadened the appeal, and set the stage for all of the great products we would launch, like Wii Fit, and eventually the Nintendo Switch." I will admit, the Wii had a very broad appeal. I mean, that was like one of the first times you really see your grandparents excited about a game system, right? As well as, maybe the teenager who's excited to play Twilight Princess at the time. It was probably the most broad that they've ever had for a game system, like in history, when it comes to this stuff, right? So in that way, I will give them that. The idea of their logo being graffiti style sounds terrible. Like, that sounds really, really bad. So I'm glad Reggie went in there and said, yeah, we're not doing that. This was for Nintendo of America, where they're trying to figure out how to appeal to Americans and as they say, an older audience. They are concerned that they were too kiddie oriented was the idea here. But what they really did that seemed to make sense here, he's talking about the Wii and going forward, and the first time we really saw Reggie was, I think, when he was on stage with the DS, right? But keep in mind, Nintendo was at least making some deals with Capcom for the Resident Evil series, and then we also had things like, Eternal Darkness, I believe Nintendo published that one, Geist, so they did kind of look at some of the mature-rated games at the time as well, but then you went into the Wii, and yeah, they definitely went super broad at that point. But then the Wii U, they had some other mature games like Bayonetta, of course, so they've kind of played around with the idea of trying to appeal to everyone, but the concerns about their logo, I don't even look at Nintendo's logo even now as like anything other than just a general logo. Maybe that's because we've seen it so many times, and back then in like the early to mid 2000s, they were like, well, we have to change it up or do something. But Reggie said no, and I think it worked out pretty well going forward. Sure, the Wii U was kind of obviously a down point for them, but the Wii worked well, and then the Switch, so they're pretty much back on top with the same logo. Next up, we'll talk about Doom Eternal. I'm very excited for Doom Eternal, coming out towards the end of March on the 20th, right alongside Animal Crossing. It'll be an interesting combination to switch between, throughout that week. But Doom Eternal had a large preview event. A lot of people got to go hands-on with it. They were able to show tons of footage. And what's interesting about this is we saw some of the multiplayer, and we saw parts of the multiplayer that people might not be too thrilled about if it ends up being absolutely correct, and it's the path they're going, which has to do with things like battle passes and possibly straight up microtransactions in that multiplayer. Yeah, so check this out. This is actually from MP First, who pointed out during Giant Bomb's 30-minute session that at the end, you could actually see different rewards, the level up system that's very similar to a battle pass. I'm going to say similar here because it doesn't outright say battle pass, but it has the rewards and of course the experience you gain, and then it also has the boosters at the top as well. And I'm a little concerned about their positioning here because of course we've seen what they've been doing with different things like Fallout First, right? That was crazy, by the way, the subscription service for Fallout 76 after what that's been through. Doom Eternal has more leeway with this because the game itself, single-player wise, looks awesome right now. So they might be looking at the multiplayer like, oh, maybe we can keep this as like a games as a service thing going forward. They get their single player, right? Think of like Grand Theft Auto. Like, single player is great. But the multiplayer, yeah, that definitely pulls in quite a bit of money because of the way it's designed. I have to see if this is just like cosmetic style things and it's not just like a gameplay advantage. I can't imagine it would be because Doom does have that competitive nature with multiplayer as well. It's a first-person, fast-paced first-person shooter. So if you do start giving advantages through a battle pass, through microtransactions, I do think your community is going to get really frustrated and just kind of disband and go away. They'll leave. They'll play another game. So if it's cosmetic stuff, I think most people will look past it. It is just interesting to see all of that, this big screen of bars filling up, experience all over the place, boosters, a battle pass. in Doom Eternal's multiplayer. Something just to keep an eye on here. And in our last bit of news, while we're saying things you should keep your eyes on, it seems like Phil Spencer had a pretty good time in Japan. Now, if you remember, I believe last year he went to Japan, and then at E3, somehow Phantasy Star Online 2 comes over to the West, which is starting up. I believe their closed beta and stuff's already been starting up. And that should be coming out sometime this year. And they even talked about it going to other platforms, which I guess means the PlayStation and the Switch as well. So interesting. But somehow Microsoft goes there, and they're the ones that come back with Phantasy Star Online 2. I don't get that one. Well, they're also getting Tales of Arise and some other Japanese-based games, which seems to have a lot to do with Phil Spencer going and making connections and talking with studios. And there's also talk about them possibly looking around at studios to buy, and they could make a big move. We'll see about that. But this is actually what Phil Spencer had to say on Twitter. Amazing week in Japan, talking Xbox Series X, Xbox Game Pass, and Project xCloud with publishers and studios. Played announced and unannounced games, talked E3 2020, and discussed gaming's future. Always come away motivated by the amazing creative talent here in Japan. So right off the bat, I do think they're going to buy a studio. I don't know who. I mean, there were talks, remember at one point, of them buying Sega. That would be ridiculous. I don't think they will necessarily. They could look for some smaller studios or something. Honestly, they might announce one, and people might just look around and go, who? Who is that? Yeah, that could actually happen there. But looking at what Phil Spencer's saying here, they probably talk some deals for Game Pass, because we know that they basically write a check to get a game on there. Remember, we saw the Yakuza series coming over this year to Game Pass. So my biggest thing here is probably that. Some third-party deals like, we want to make sure we get Tales of Arise, right? There probably is another Japanese-based third-party game coming up soon that would be revealed at E3. It is good to see Xbox and Microsoft looking more at Japan, because that is their big weak spot right now. They have to figure out how to be able to sell Xbox systems in Japan. And if they really do have the price advantage coming up this generation with what we hear at Lockhart, if they really do have that advantage, then they need to also have the games next to it, and they need people to understand that it's not a Blu-ray player. So we'll see what happens coming up next generation. But if they do focus on Japan, their big weak spot, they could actually make a bit of a turnaround here going to next generation with all of their things like Game Pass and some pretty cool games that are coming down the pipeline for them. So at least from what we're seeing on Twitter, Phil Spencer at least is putting in the legwork to try to make that happen. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Speed saying, Nintendo is loving all this free media attention for the Switch since almost every site has run a Switch Pro story for what feels like the last 6 years. We have been talking about the Switch Pro for a while now, haven't we? Like, I feel like it's been years now. Like, we talked about the analyst that predicted it. This is like the second year in a row, right? And even before then, I feel like people have been talking about it. It's been going on for a while. Look, if I'm Nintendo and there's no Switch Pro in development and I'm looking out, seeing all this talk, I don't think I'm going to correct them. I'll just let them keep talking about it, because like you're saying, it's free publicity, it's free advertisement. I'm not saying anything. I'm just like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you guys go ahead and talk about that over there. We're going to introduce these games, but you guys keep talking about the hardware and keep saying Nintendo over and over again. We're fine with that. Yeah, that's exactly how I would look at it. I mean, if there is a Switch Pro, people have been building this thing up for years, and it'll probably do fine as well, but I wouldn't say anything if I was Nintendo, and I think that's their strategy anyway, because the most I've ever seen them really get into it was when Doug Bowser said, I think this was in like October maybe, he said there was no more hardware coming this year or something, and it was when the Lite was announced, and he just said no, there's no more hardware coming this year. And I mean, he was correct. We had that quiet revision, that silent revision that they didn't really acknowledge. But yeah, that's all I would ever really do is like, yeah, no more hardware. Make sure you guys buy at Christmas time. Thanks. We'll see you next year. And ladies and gentlemen, let's go do here for Newswave. Enjoyed this video, guys. Hit that like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about today, whether it's Silent Hill. Can Konami bring this franchise back? 2 different games, shopping around developers, soft reboot, episodic series next to it. Can they make this happen, or are you're just like, nah, Konami cannot do it. They don't care enough. Unless it is a slot machine, they're not gonna care that much and put the time in. Let me know about that one. And then what else about Nintendo's logo? Let me ask you this. If you're Reggie and they were kind of thinking about this, would you have just gone along with it, or would you also have said, nah, we're not gonna change this? We're going to keep it straight up, especially if they walked in your office with like a graffiti looking logo. Let me know about that one. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.